Good day, everyone. Again, my name is Eugene Pabul for the subject Information Assurance and Security. Our lesson today is about access controls. Let me show to you the learning objectives of our lesson. First is define access control concepts and technologies, describe the formal models of access control, describe how identity is managed by access control, and develop and maintain system access controls. The key concepts of this lesson is we have the access control concepts and technologies, the formal models of access control, the identity is managed by access control, and developing and maintaining system access control. Defining access control. So based on the definition, the process of protecting a resource so that it is used only by those allowed to. And it prevents unauthorized use. Then we have also mitigations put into place to protect a resource from a threat. Okay, to fully understand about access control, we will first understand the four parts of it. Okay, so in our access control, it has four components, or it has four parts. First is the identification. Identification, it refers to who is asking access the asset. Who is trying to log in. The next is we have the authentication. Can their identities be verified? So in authentication, we will verify if it is truly the true user that is trying to access an asset. Then we have the authorization. What exactly the requester access and what can they do? So in authorization, it is now giving permissions to a particular user or organizations. It will authorize to access, to edit. It depends upon the rule of the user. And we have accountability. How are actions traced to an individual to ensure the person who makes data or system changes can be identified. So under accountability, so anyone who accesses the application, the organization is responsible. So it might be in terms of application logs, no, or event logs of the system, so that we could trace someone accountable for any actions being done. Okay, so we will now proceed to the next. Okay, we have the policy definition and policy enforcement phases. Okay, so our components of access control are divided into two phases. So the two phases are the policy definition phase and the policy enforcement phase. So for policy definition phase, who has access and what systems or resources they can use. So this phase is tied up to the authorization component, no, that is mentioned earlier. If we will go back, the authorization phase, this one. Then we have the policy enforcement phase. Grants or rejects requests for access based on the authorizations defined in the first phase. So reject requests for access. So that falls under identification. Now we have the two types of access controls. So simply lang kayo, no? We have the physical and the logical access controls. So when we say physical access controls, these control access to physical resources. So they could include buildings, parking lots, and protected areas. For example, you probably have a key to the door of your office. So the one you use to open the door is that. Then this key controls the physical access to your office. Now we have the logical access controls, or this control access to a computer system or network. So your company probably requires that you enter a unique username and password. A username and password allow you to use the organization's computer system and the network resources. So under the physical access control, we have the smart cards. So an organization's facilities manager is often responsible for physical access control. So this person might give you a security card, also known as a smart card, and programmed with your employee ID number. So you might need to swipe this card through a card reader to open a gate, then to the parking lot and swipe it in the elevator to be let off on your floor. You might also need to swipe this card to unlock the door leading to your office. So this card allows you to enter these locations, no? Because you are an employee. So the organization's authorization, the policy grants you. Physical access to certain places is allowed. So people without an authorized card could not get past the front gate, the elevator, and the offices. So this card controls access to physical resources. Okay, for our logical access control, deciding which users can get into a system. Okay, security administrators use logical access controls to decide who can get into a system and what tasks they can perform. So for example, a system manager can also use logical access controls to influence how staff personnel use a system and restraining or influencing the user's behavior on that system. So for example, an HR staff who repeatedly tries to view restricted information might be denied access to. Okay, we have the security kernel. So it is said there that enforces access control for computer systems, central point of access control, and implements the reference monitor concept. Okay, the security kernel, it is the central part of a computing environment's hardware, software, and it can be firmware that enforces access control for computer systems. The security kernel provides a central point of access control and implements or the reference monitor concept. So it mediates all access requests and permits access only when the appropriate rules or conditions are met. So for example, the subject requests access to an object, then the security kernel intercepts the request. So it uses these rules to determine access rights. Access rights are set according to the policies of your organization. So the kernel allows or denies based on the defined access rules. Access control policies. So we have four central components of access control. First, we have the users, the resources, actions, and the relationships. An access control policy, it is a set of rules that allows a specific group of users to perform a particular set of actions or a particular set of resources. So if users aren't authorized, then they don't have access to control policies. To reduce and control security risks, both automated processes and humans use access control policies. You must understand the four central components of access control to manage access control policies well. These are people who use the system or processes that perform some services for other people or processes. It is a more general term for users is subjects or subject. Resources, protected objects in the system. So unsa man atong giprotektaran sa system? So our files, the information, the personal information, di ba? Resources can be accessed only by authorized subjects, and that resources can be used only in authorized ways. Actions. These are activities that authorized users can perform on resources. Relationships. Functional conditions that exist between users and resources. Relationships are permissions granted to an authorized user, such as read, write, and execute. So those are the four access or central components of access control. Okay, in our logical access control solutions, okay, we have the logical controls: biometric, fingerprints, the iris granularity, the retina blood vessels, the facial features, and hand geometry. And for dynamic, we have voice inflections. So some biometrics can recognize voice. To gain access, it will analyze your voice. You have the keyboard strokes. Now we have tokens. We have the synchronous or asynchronous tokens, and we have smart cards and the memory cards. Okay, then we have passwords. Stringent password controls for users. Then we have the account lockout policies. Account lockout policies class is when you type wrong password for multiple times, you will be prohibited to enter some logon credentials. Then we have also the auditing logon events. So these are logs, no? These are logs who try to access the system. And we have the single sign-on. We have the Kerberos process, secure European system for applications in a multi-vendor environment. This is mostly used by large organizations or distributed systems. So because distributed computers are using this type of security in their sign-on. Next. Okay, methods and guidelines for identification. So in identification, we have the username, the smart card, and the biometrics. The guidelines or actions. So to ensure that all actions carried out in a computer system, it can be associated with a specific user. Okay, now for the authentication types. First, we have the knowledge. Okay, something you know, such as a password, passphrase, or personal identification number, or PINs. The ownership, something you have. Could it be something you have, such as the smart card, the key, a badge, or a token, no? USB tokens. Characteristics, some attribute that is unique to you, such as your fingerprints, retina, or your signature. Since the characteristics involved are often physical, this type of authentication is sometimes defined as something that you are. Then we have the location. Somewhere you are, such as your physical location. When you attempt to access a resource, then it will detect your location where you are accessing. Action, something you do or how you do it. Authentication by knowledge. Okay. First, we have knowledge, ownership, characteristics, location, and action. So we have 5 authentication types. So we will discuss thoroughly the 5 authentication types. Authentication by knowledge. Okay, password. One of the most visible security policies is the user account policy. So this is a policy that each user must encounter. So a good user account policy sets clear requirements for user accounts and passwords. So you have already seen that an account policy should prohibit generic user accounts. So your account policy should also include password best practices. So dili dapat ang mga weak passwords because they are easily cracked by brute force or dictionary attack. Now we have passphrase. It is considered as stronger than a password. Usually, passphrases contains more than one word. A passphrase is more secure against dictionary attacks because most often, passphrases are used for public and private key authentication. The user uses a passphrase that is known only to the user, and the user uses that passphrase to unlock a private key that gives the user access to information. So in most cases, the user converts the passphrase to a password. However, a system can be programmed to automatically convert the passphrase to a password according to an algorithm. So a passphrase is stronger than a password, but the downside is that it takes a bit longer to type a passphrase. Although passphrases are static, they are not as susceptible as to brute force attacks. Then we have the account lockout policies. Many systems are configured to disable a user ID after a certain instances of consecutive failed logon attempts. That triggers an account action is called the threshold. The user may be locked out for a few minutes, a few hours, or until the account is reset by a security administrator. So this practice helps guard against attacks in which attackers may make many attempts to guess a password. It also enables an intruder to lock out users. However, it is a form of denial of service attack by entering groups of incorrect passwords.